Passion Glitter Purpose, where we use our passion to pursue our purpose and put Jesus in everything that we do. My name is Imani Naila, and this is Bible Study with me. We are continuing in our year-long Genesis study. We are halfway there, so this is Genesis 25. Super excited. But anyways, by the time you all see this, hopefully this design will already be up on the website. saltyclothingco.com. That's SALTEE clothingco.com. It's my baby that I released out into the world, and I thank you all for your support. But anyways, let's get into Genesis chapter 25. Go ahead and grab your Bibles, whatever you need to follow along, and let's get to it. So in Genesis chapter 25, this is where Abraham dies. But before he dies, it says in verse 1 that Abraham married another wife whose name was Keturah. So just in verse 1, what I took from that was, it's okay to move on. Sarah had passed away before this, and Abraham, he remarried and he had more children. So when things don't go as planned, it's okay to move on. Not only did he move on and got remarried, but he had a bunch of other children. So he was fruitful and multiplied. I won't read all their names. But in verse 5, it says that Abraham gave everything he owned to his son, Isaac. And Isaac was the promised child from God. So Abraham transferred all of his possessions to his promised child. But he also took care of his other children. So verse 6 says, before he died, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them off to a land in the east away from Isaac. And that Abraham lived for 175 years, and he died at the ripe old age, having lived a long and satisfying life. He breathed his last breath and joined his ancestors in death. And then Isaac and Ishmael, they buried him in the same place where he buried Sarah. And this was land that he bought from the Hittites in the land of Canaan. So that was still the only piece of land that he owned in the land of Canaan. And Canaan is the promised land that God has promised to give him. So Abraham died before he could even see the fullness of the promise of God. But God still fulfilled his word to Abraham, that he'll be the father of many nations. So verse 11 tells us that after Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who settled near Beer-lahai-roi in the Negev. So the blessing on Abraham's life was passed on to the next generation. So just like there are generational curses that I know many of us are fighting to break, there's also generational blessings that can be passed on to our children's children when we choose to obey God and to live a life submitted to God. And then verses 12 to 18 just kind of give a lineage. So moving on to verse 19, so like I said, 12 to 18 gave a lineage of Ishmael's descendants, who was Isaac's brother. And now we're seeing the story of Isaac. So verse 19 tells us, this is the account of the family of Isaac, the son of Abraham. When Isaac was 40 years old, so he was younger than Abraham, but when he was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and the sister of Laban the Aramean. And Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was unable to have children. So just parking it right there, ladies. Get you a man that's going to pray for you, that's going to go to God on your behalf. So I love to see how Isaac was pleading with God on Rebekah's behalf for her to have children. So yeah, get you a man that will cover you in prayer. It says Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was unable to have children. The Lord answered Isaac's prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant with twins. But the two children struggled with each other in her womb. So she went to ask the Lord about it. Why is this happening to me? She asked. So I love how we see both Isaac and Rebekah knowing who to turn to. So Rebekah was struggling to get pregnant, and Isaac went to God and prayed. And now that she's pregnant, she's having a difficult pregnancy. And instead of, going to go talk to it, going to Isaac or going to her friends. She's going to God and she's asking him, why is this happening? And that's convicting for me, because at times I'll call my mama, or I'll talk to my friends before I would go and talk to God. So you want to make sure that God is our first person that we go to. So know who to go to for answers. And then verse 23 tells us, and the Lord told her, the sons in your womb will become two nations. From the very beginning, the two nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and your older son will serve your younger son. And when the time came to give birth, Rebekah discovered that she did indeed have twins. The first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair like a fur coat. So they named him Esau. Then the other twin was born with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. So this was a 20-year difference. They got married when Isaac was 40. He did not become a dad until he was 60. So it just really challenges me to see, like, can I have the patient endurance to wait on the Lord, to trust in the Lord, and to believe, take him at his word? Because he did it for his dad, he did it for Abraham and Sarah. Isaac was that promised child. That took 25 years. So now, knowing his family's background, Isaac had to hold on to that for himself, and to believe that that same God who did it for his dad would also do it for him. And we can also stand on that. The same God back then is the same God right now. So yeah, they waited 20 years for God to answer that prayer. So now we see their upbringing between the upbringing of Jacob and Esau, and how this division took place. So it says in verse 27, as the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter. He was an outdoors man, but Jacob had a quiet temperament, preferring to stay at home. Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating the wild game Esau brought home, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So here we can just see what not to do in parenting, not to have favorites. That's something we definitely don't want. I'm not a parent yet, but I know I'm going to keep this in my back pocket to make sure, like, I'm not having favorites when it comes to my children. And knowing that, like, Isaac loved Esau more because he benefited off of what Esau was doing. He liked to eat the food that Esau was catching. But I guess since Rebekah liked to stay in the house, and that's where Jacob was, they spent more time together, and she favored him. But it says, one day when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau arrived home from the wilderness, exhausted and hungry. Esau said to Jacob, I'm starved. Give me some of that red stew. All right, Jacob replied, but trade me your rights as the firstborn son. So Jacob's name means to be a heel grabber, to be a deceiver. So he's playing into this right now. But even though his actions are wrong, this was already spoken by God. Because we saw in verse 23 that the Lord told her that from the beginning that they will have a rival, and that one will be stronger than the other, and that the older will serve the younger. And Jacob is younger than Esau. So we're seeing how God's word is being fulfilled. And then Esau replied, look, I'm dying of starvation. What good is my birthright to me now? But Jacob said, first you must swear that your birthright is mine. So Esau swore an oath, thereby selling all his rights as the firstborn to his brother Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate the meal, then got up and left. He showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. So that was the last verse in this chapter, but there's so much happened just in those few verses. So we see Esau being irrational. He's hungry, his flesh is overtaking him, and he's making poor decisions right now. And we do that, like, it seems stupid, like, how could he trade his birthright for something to eat? But we do things like this all the time. We let our flesh overtake us, and in return, we trade the spiritual rights that we have. We trade our access to the blessings of God because we want to instantly gratify our flesh. So we see two parts here. Like, for one, Jacob took advantage. Esau was tired and hungry. So Jacob took advantage of Esau. We want to make sure that we are not taking advantage of people when they are weak. But then on the other side, we also, when we are in that vulnerable state, we want to make sure we're not making big decisions when we know we're not right. We need to sleep on it before we end up doing something that we're going to regret. And when I see the birthright, I see how when we're born, in the natural, we all have the right to become children of God. We all have, because of Jesus, we all have the opportunity to be reconciled with God. But some of us, sadly, will never accept that birthright because of carnal things, because of fleshly things. And then as believers, sometimes we're even guilty of not waiting on God. We're guilty of not holding on to the things of God because of our flesh. And kind of like the prodigal son, like we want our inheritance now, we want our blessing now, and we forfeit it. We want not even the blessing, like we want to be satisfied now. We want to be satisfied in this moment. We want to do what feels good to our flesh in this moment, and we forfeit the things of God by settling. And we saw that with Abraham's dad. God told Abraham's dad to go to the land of Canaan, but he settled and didn't go all the way. So we want to make sure that as believers, we have a heavenly birthright. We are sons and daughters of God, and that gives us access to the things of God and the blessings and the promises of God. We want to make sure that we don't allow our flesh to cause us to forfeit those things and to settle when God has so much in store for us. So I think I'll probably title Genesis 25, Don't Settle. So yeah, don't settle. Wait on God, trust in God. He will do what he says. And yeah, so Jesus loves you. I love you. I'll see you next week. Make sure to purchase your shirts at saltyclothingco.com. And yeah, see you next week.